The autumn morning mist clung to the brick facades of Roosevelt High School in Columbus, Ohio, as 17-year-old Sofia Rivera carefully navigated the crowded hallways with her white cane. The familiar sounds of slamming lockers, hurried footsteps, and teenage chatter created a chaotic symphony that she had learned to decode over the years. "Watch it, blind girl," sneered Tyler Brooks, deliberately bumping into her shoulder as she approached her locker. Sofia's books scattered across the polished linoleum floor, and she felt the familiar sting of humiliation wash over her. "I'm sorry," Sofia whispered automatically, her voice barely audible above the hallway noise. "Sofia, don't apologize to him," said her best friend Emma Thompson, rushing to help gather the fallen books. "He did that on purpose." Sofia's fingers trembled as she felt for her combination lock. Born with Leber congenital amaurosis, she had been blind since birth, but it wasn't her disability that made her feel invisible at Roosevelt High. It was her voice, or rather, her fear of using it. In her AP English class, Mrs. Patterson announced the annual school-wide speech competition. "This year's theme is Voices of Change," she explained, her voice carrying across the classroom. "The winner will represent our school at the state championship and receive a full scholarship to Ohio State University." Sofia's heart raced. She had always been passionate about writing and had filled countless journals with her thoughts about accessibility, equality, and the power of perseverance. But the thought of speaking publicly made her palms sweat and her chest tighten. "I think you should enter," Emma whispered during lunch in the cafeteria. "Your essays are incredible, Sofia. You have something important to say." Sofia shook her head, picking at her sandwich. "You know I can't do public speaking, Em. I can barely order food without my voice shaking." The cafeteria buzzed with conversations about the competition. At the popular table across the room, Tyler Brooks was already boasting about his chances of winning. "It's basically guaranteed," he laughed loudly. "Who else here has any real talent for speaking?" That afternoon, Sofia sat in her favorite spot under the old oak tree in the school courtyard, her fingers dancing across her Braille notebook as she wrote. The October breeze carried the scent of fallen leaves, and she could hear the distant sound of marching band practice from the football field. "Sofia," came a gentle voice. She recognized it immediately. Mr. David Harrison, her favorite teacher and the debate club advisor. "Hi, Mr. Harrison," she replied, quickly closing her notebook. "I couldn't help but notice you seemed interested when Mrs. Patterson mentioned the speech competition today," he said, settling down on the bench beside her. "I've read your essays, Sofia. You have a gift for words that could truly make a difference." Sofia's face flushed. "I appreciate that, but I'm not the kind of person who speaks in front of crowds." "What kind of person do you think you are?" Mr. Harrison asked quietly. The question hung in the air like the autumn mist. Sofia had never really thought about it that way. She had always defined herself by her limitations rather than her possibilities. "I'm just quiet," she finally answered. "Some of the most powerful voices in history belong to people who were told they were just quiet," Mr. Harrison said. Helen Keller was considered just disabled until she found her voice. Sometimes the world needs to hear from those who've been silent the longest. That evening at home, Sofia sat at her desk in her modest bedroom, her fingers tracing the raised dots of her latest journal entry. Through the thin walls of their duplex, she could hear her mother, Carmen Rivera, finishing up a phone call with a client. As a social worker who had immigrated from Puerto Rico 15 years ago, Carmen had built her career on helping others find their voices. "Mija," Carmen said, knocking gently on the door. "How was school today?" "Fine," Sofia replied automatically, but her mother's knowing silence made her reconsider. Carmen had a way of sensing when something was weighing on her daughter's mind. "There's a speech competition at school," Sofia admitted. "The winner gets a scholarship to Ohio State." Carmen sat on the edge of the bed, the mattress creaking softly. And I want to enter, but..." Sofia's voice trailed off. "But you're scared," Carmen finished gently. "Mija, do you know why I came to this country?" Sofia had heard fragments of her mother's story over the years, but Carmen rarely spoke about her past in detail. "I was 19, barely spoke English, and pregnant with you," Carmen continued. "Everyone told me I was making a mistake, that I should stay where it was safe and familiar. But I knew that sometimes you have to find courage you didn't know you had, especially when it's not just about you anymore." What do you mean? I mean that every time someone like us stays silent, we let others believe we have nothing valuable to say. But when we speak up, we open doors not just for ourselves, but for everyone who comes after us. Sophia felt tears foaming in her eyes. She had never thought about her silence as affecting anyone but herself. I don't know if I'm brave enough, Mom. Carmen reached over and took her daughter's hand. Courage isn't about not being afraid, Mija. It's about deciding that what you have to say is more important than your fear. Late that night, Sophia lay in bed listening to the gentle hum of traffic from Route 33 in the distance. She thought about all the time she had remained silent when she witnessed injustice, in the hallways at school, in restaurants where servers spoke to her companions instead of directly to her, in stores where employees assumed she couldn't make her own decisions. She thought about the scholarship that could change her life, but more than that, she thought about Mr. Harrison's words and her mother's story. Maybe it was time to stop being just quiet. The next morning, Sophia made her way to Mr. Harrison's classroom before first period. Her heart pounded as she approached his desk. "Mr. Harrison," she said, her voice slightly shaky but determined. "Yes, Sophia. I want to enter the competition." The words came out in a rush, as if she might lose her nerve if she spoke too slowly. Mr. Harrison's face broke into a genuine smile. "I was hoping you'd say that. When do we start?" But as Sophia left the classroom, she had no idea that her decision would set in motion a series of events that would test not only her courage but also challenge the very foundations of how her school, and eventually her entire community, viewed disability, voice, and the power of one teenager's determination to be heard. The real struggle was just beginning. 3 weeks had passed since Sophia signed up for the speech competition, and the school auditorium had become her second home. Every afternoon, she practiced with Mr. Harrison, refining her speech about the power of invisible voices, a passionate plea for understanding that disability doesn't mean inability, and that society's greatest losses often come from the voices we never hear. "Your message is powerful, Sophia," Mr. Harrison said after another practice session. "But remember, you need to project more. The judges need to feel your conviction from the back row." Sophia nodded, wiping perspiration from her forehead. The auditorium felt massive and intimidating, even when empty. She couldn't see the red velvet seats or the ornate ceiling, but she could sense the space's vastness in the way her voice echoed back to her. The competition was scheduled for Friday, just 4 days away. Word had spread throughout Roosevelt High, and for the first time in her school career, Sophia found herself at the center of attention. Some students offered genuine encouragement, while others whispered doubts about whether a blind girl could really compete with the school's top speakers. "I heard she's actually pretty good," said Ashley Kim to her friend near Sophia's locker. "Come on," replied her companion. "Tyler Brooks has been in debate club for 3 years. There's no way she can beat him." Sophia pretended not to hear, but each comment chipped away at her newfound confidence. Tyler himself had become increasingly hostile as the competition approached. "This is a joke," he said loudly in the hallway on Tuesday. "They're probably going to give her pity points just because she's disabled. How is that fair to the rest of us?" Emma immediately stepped forward. "That's enough, Tyler. She earned her spot just like everyone else." "Did she?" Tyler sneered. "Or is this just another participation trophy situation?" That afternoon, Sophia was practicing in the empty auditorium when she heard familiar footsteps approaching. Principal Margaret Foster's heels clicked against the polished floor with purposeful authority. "Miss Rivera," Principal Foster called out, her voice echoing in the large space. "I need to speak with you." Sophia's stomach dropped. Principal Foster's tone carried the weight of bad news. "Yes, ma'am. I've been receiving some concerns from parents and school board members about your participation in the competition," Principal Foster began, her words carefully measured. Mr. Harrison, who had been organizing notes at the piano, looked up sharply. "What kind of concerns?" "Some feel that Miss Rivera's participation might create an unfair dynamic for the other competitors," Principal Foster explained. "There are worries about judges feeling pressured to show favoritism due to her circumstances." Sophia felt the blood drain from her face. "Are you saying I can't compete?" "I'm saying that perhaps it would be better for everyone if you considered withdrawing voluntarily," Principal Foster replied. "We could arrange for you to present your speech at a school assembly instead." you'd still get to share your message without the pressure of competition. The auditorium fell silent except for the distant sound of after-school activities echoing through the building. Sophia's hands trembled as she gripped her white cane. "With all due respect, Principal Foster," Mr. Harrison said, his voice tight with controlled anger, "Sophia earned her place in this competition through the same audition process as every other student. Her speech was selected based on its merit, not her disability." "I understand your position, Mr. Harrison, but I have to consider what's best for the school community as a whole," Principal Foster replied. "The competition is meant to showcase our students' abilities, not become a platform for other agendas." "Other agendas?" Sophia found her voice, and it came out stronger than she expected. "My speech is about inclusion and understanding. How is that not exactly what education should promote?" Principal Foster's pause was telling. "Miss Rivera, I'm sure your intentions are good, but we need to be realistic about the optics of this situation. The state competition has never had a participant with your challenges. It might reflect poorly on our school if you were to advance and then struggle at that level." The words hit Sophia like a physical blow. All her life, she had faced low expectations and assumptions about her capabilities, but she had never expected them from her own school's administration. "You're not just asking me to withdraw," Sophia said, her voice growing steadier with each word. "You're telling me that my voice doesn't belong here. That students like me should stay quiet and grateful for whatever scraps of participation you're willing to offer." "That's not what I'm saying at all," Principal Foster protested, but her tone suggested otherwise. Mr. Harrison stepped forward. "Actually, Principal Foster, that's exactly what you're saying. And it's not just wrong, it's potentially illegal. The Americans with Disabilities Act guarantees equal access to educational opportunities." "Don't threaten me with legal action, Mr. Harrison. I'm trying to handle this delicately." "There's nothing delicate about discrimination," he replied firmly. That evening, Sophia sat at her kitchen table, picking at the dinner her mother had prepared. Carmen could sense her daughter's distress in the way she moved, slower, more hesitant, as if the confidence she had been building had suddenly evaporated. "What happened today, Mija?" Carmen asked gently. Sophia told her mother about the meeting with Principal Foster, about the concerns from parents and school board members, about being asked to voluntarily withdraw to avoid making others uncomfortable. Carmen's fork clattered against her plate. "They want you to be silent again." "Maybe they're right," Sophia whispered. "Maybe I'm being selfish. Maybe this is too much attention, too much controversy." Carmen reached across the table and took her daughter's hands. "Sophia, look at me." Even though Sophia couldn't see her mother's face, she turned toward her voice. "When I was your age in San Juan, I wanted to be a teacher," Carmen began. "But my guidance counselor told me I should consider more practical options for someone from my neighborhood. She suggested I learn to be a secretary or work in a factory. She said I was being unrealistic to dream bigger. What did you do?" "I listened to her. I stayed quiet. I accepted what others thought I deserved instead of fighting for what I knew I was capable of." Carmen's voice grew thick with emotion. "I don't regret the path my life took. It brought me you, and I love my work as a social worker. But I do regret not speaking up, not proving that counselor wrong." Sophia felt tears streaming down her cheeks. "You have a gift, Mija. Not just your writing, but your perspective, your strength, your ability to help others see the world differently. If you withdraw from this competition, you're not just silencing yourself, you're confirming their belief that students like you don't belong on that stage." "But what if I fail? What if I prove them right? And what if you succeed? What if you show them that their assumptions were wrong? What if your voice opens doors for other students who are told they're too different to compete?" That night, Sophia called Mr. Harrison at home. "I'm not withdrawing," she said when he answered. "I was hoping you'd say that," he replied. "But you should know, this isn't going to be easy. Principal Foster has scheduled a school board meeting for tomorrow night. There's going to be pressure to remove you from the competition entirely." "Then I guess we'd better make sure my speech is perfect," Sophia said, surprised by her own determination. The next day at school, news of the controversy had spread. Students and teachers were divided into clear camps, those who supported Sophia's right to compete and those who agreed with the administration's concerns. The hallways buzzed with heated discussions about fairness, discrimination, and whether Roosevelt High was ready for this kind of attention. "I can't believe they're trying to silence you," Emma said during lunch. "This is exactly the kind of thing your speech is about." But the pressure was mounting. Tyler Brooks and several other competitors had written a formal letter to the school board expressing their concerns about preferential treatment and unfair advantages. Parents began calling the school, some supporting Sophia, others demanding her removal from the competition. By Thursday afternoon, Sophia felt the weight of the entire controversy pressing down on her shoulders. As she practiced her speech one final time before the school board meeting, her voice cracked with emotion and exhaustion. "I don't know if I can do this, Mr. Harrison," she admitted. "Maybe it would be easier for everyone if I just stepped aside." Mr. Harrison was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Sophia, do you know what your speech has already accomplished?" "What do you mean?" "You've started a conversation that this school, this community, needed to have. Students are talking about accessibility, about inclusion, about what it means to have equal opportunities. Teachers are examining their own biases. Parents are questioning their assumptions. That's the power of voice, even before you step onto that stage. But what if the school board votes to remove me? Then we fight it. But Sophia, I need you to understand something. This isn't just about a speech competition anymore. This is about whether Roosevelt High School, and our entire community, is ready to embrace all of its students' voices, or whether it will continue to silence those who make others uncomfortable." As they prepared to leave for the school board meeting, Sophia realized that her biggest challenge wasn't going to be delivering her speech on Friday. It was going to be convincing a room full of adults that her voice deserved to be heard at all. The battle for her right to speak was just beginning, and it would test everything she believed about courage, justice, and the power of standing up for what's right, even when, especially when, the entire world seems to be telling you to sit down and be quiet. The Roosevelt High School board meeting room was packed beyond capacity on Thursday evening. Sophia sat in the front row with her mother and Mr. Harrison, acutely aware that every whispered conversation and rustling paper seemed to center around her. The October air outside had turned crisp, but inside the cramped room, tensions ran hot. School Board President Helen Crawford called the meeting to order, her gavel echoing sharply in the overcrowded space. "We're here tonight to address concerns raised about student participation in tomorrow's speech competition." Sophia's heart pounded as various community members stood to speak. The room was deeply divided. "My daughter has worked for 3 years to earn her place in this competition," said Mrs. Brooks, Tyler's mother. "It's unfair to change the rules now just to accommodate one student's special needs." But then Maria Santos, a local disability rights advocate, stood up. "This isn't about accommodation, it's about access. Sophia Rivera earned her spot through the same audition process as every other student. To remove her now would be discrimination, plain and simple." The debate continued for over an hour. Parents, teachers, and community members' passionate voices filled the room, but Sophia noticed that no one was asking for her perspective. She was being discussed as if she weren't even there. Finally, board member James Wilson spoke directly to her. "Miss Rivera, would you like to address the board?" Sophia's mouth went dry. This wasn't her prepared speech. This was an impromptu defense of her right to even give that speech. She stood slowly, her cane tapping against the floor. "2 months ago, I was invisible in the hallways of Roosevelt High," she began, her voice quiet but clear. "Not because I'm blind, but because I was silent. I accepted that my voice didn't matter, that my perspectives weren't worth sharing." The room gradually quieted as she spoke. "When I decided to enter this competition, it wasn't because I wanted attention or special treatment. It was because I realized that every time I stay silent, I confirm what some people already believe, that students like me have nothing valuable to contribute." She paused, feeling the weight of dozens of eyes on her. "If you remove me from tomorrow's competition, you're not protecting other students from unfair advantages. You're teaching them that difference should be silenced, that inclusion is conditional, and that some voices matter more than others. Is that really the lesson Roosevelt High School wants to teach?" When she sat down, the room was completely silent for several long seconds. The school board voted 4-3 to allow Sophia to compete. Friday arrived gray and drizzling, matching Sophia's nervous energy. The auditorium filled steadily throughout the afternoon as students, teachers, parents, and even local news crews gathered for what had become more than just a high school speech competition. "Channel 6 News is here," Emma whispered to Sophia backstage. "This is huge, sophomore." Sophia felt sick to her stomach. What had started as her personal challenge to find her voice had become a public spectacle. The pressure felt enormous. Mr. Harrison found her in the quiet corner where she was doing vocal warm-ups. "How are you feeling?" "Terrified," she admitted. "What if I freeze up there? What if I prove everyone right who said I shouldn't be here?" "Sophia, you've already won," he said gently. "Regardless of what happens on that stage tonight, you've shown incredible courage. You've started conversations that needed to happen. You've inspired other students to examine their own assumptions and biases." "But what if my speech isn't good enough?" Mr. Harrison was quiet for a moment. "Do you remember why you wrote this speech?" "Because I wanted to help people understand that being different doesn't mean being less capable." "Then trust that message. Trust your voice. And remember, you're not just speaking for yourself tonight. You're speaking for every student who's ever been told they don't belong somewhere." The competition began with the customary introductions. As each participant was announced, Sophia listened to the polite applause, trying to gauge the audience's energy. When her name was called, the response was notably different. Some enthusiastic cheering mixed with scattered, reluctant clapping. Tyler Brooks spoke first, delivering a technically proficient speech about leadership and academic excellence. His presentation was smooth and confident, exactly what everyone expected from a 3-year debate club veteran. 2 other competitors followed with well-crafted speeches about environmental responsibility and social media's impact on teenage mental health. Both were solid, safe choices that drew positive responses from the audience. Then it was Sophia's turn. She made her way to the podium, her white cane tapping against the stage floor. The auditorium fell completely silent, a silence that felt different from the respectful quiet that had greeted the other speakers. This silence felt charged with anticipation, curiosity, and perhaps a hint of skepticism. Sophia placed her hands on the podium, took a deep breath, and began. "3 months ago, if you had told me I would be standing on this stage tonight, I would have laughed," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the sound system. "Not because I'm blind, but because I had convinced myself that my voice didn't matter." She could feel the audience's attention sharpen. "I want to tell you about invisible voices, not the voices of people who can't speak, but the voices of people who have been convinced they shouldn't speak. I want to tell you about the cost of silence, and the power of finally being heard." Sophia spoke about growing up in a world that often treated her disability as a tragedy to be pitted rather than a difference to be understood. She talked about the countless times she had been spoken about rather than spoken to, the assumptions made about her capabilities, the opportunities she had been discouraged from pursuing. "But tonight, I'm not here to talk about disability," she continued, her confidence growing with each word. "I'm here to talk about ability, the ability we all have to choose inclusion over exclusion, understanding over assumption, courage over comfort." Her voice grew stronger as she described the students at Roosevelt High who felt invisible for various reasons. The immigrant students whose accents made them self-conscious about speaking in class, the LGBTQ+ students who hid parts of themselves to avoid harassment, the students from low-income families who felt they didn't belong in advanced courses. "Every time we silence a voice because it sounds different, looks different, or comes from a different experience than our own, we make our community smaller," Sophia said. "We lose perspectives that could solve problems, create innovations, or simply help us understand each other better." She paused, letting her words sink in. "This week, some people suggested that I didn't belong in this competition. They worried that my participation would somehow diminish the achievements of other students. But I believe the opposite is true. When we create spaces where all voices can be heard, we don't diminish anyone, we elevate everyone." The audience was completely captivated. Even the news cameras had stopped their subtle movements to focus entirely on her words. "I am not asking for your pity or your special consideration," Sophia continued. "I am asking for your recognition that diversity of voice leads to strength of community. I am asking you to consider that the student sitting next to you who seems different might have exactly the perspective you need to hear." She concluded with a personal reflection that brought tears to many eyes in the audience. "If I win this competition tonight, I hope it's because my message resonated with you, not because you felt sorry for me. And if I lose, I hope it's because another student had a more compelling message, not because you couldn't see past my disability to hear my words." She paused one final time. "But regardless of the outcome, I am no longer invisible. I am no longer silent. And I hope that my voice tonight has encouraged other invisible voices in this room to step forward and be heard. Because our community is only as strong as the voices we choose to include." The auditorium erupted in thunderous applause that went on for several minutes. As Sophia made her way back to her seat, she could hear people throughout the audience crying, cheering, and expressing genuine emotion in ways that typical high school competitions rarely inspired. The remaining competitors delivered their speeches to a respectful but notably less enthusiastic audience. The energy in the room had shifted dramatically after Sophia's presentation. During the judges' deliberation, local news reporter Jennifer Walsh approached Sophia for an interview. "That was an extraordinary speech," she said. "How does it feel to know that your words tonight have already had such an impact on this community?" Sophia considered the question carefully. "I hope what people take away from tonight isn't that I'm exceptional because I'm blind and can still give a speech. I hope they understand that everyone, regardless of their differences, has something valuable to contribute when we create inclusive spaces for them to be heard." When the judges returned, the auditorium fell silent once again. Principal Foster took the microphone, looking somewhat uncomfortable as she prepared to announce the results. "This year's speech competition has been unique," she began. "The judges want you to know that all 5 participants delivered exceptional presentations that would make Roosevelt High School proud at the state level." She paused, opening the envelope with the results. However, one speech tonight transcended typical competition parameters. One speaker managed to not only deliver a technically excellent presentation but also to challenge all of us to examine our assumptions, our biases, and our commitment to creating an inclusive community. Sophia's heart raced, but she tried to prepare herself for disappointment. She had achieved her goal of finding her voice. Winning had never been the real point. The winner of this year's Roosevelt High School speech competition, and our representative at the state championship, is Sophia Rivera. The auditorium exploded in celebration. Students leaped to their feet, teachers wiped away tears, and even some of the parents who had initially opposed her participation applauded enthusiastically. But the most meaningful moment came when Tyler Brooks approached her after the ceremony. "Sophia," he said quietly, his usual arrogance completely absent, "I owe you an apology. I was wrong about everything. Your speech tonight was incredible, and you earned this win completely." "Thank you, Tyler," Sophia replied graciously. "I hope we can work together to make Roosevelt High a place where all students feel comfortable sharing their voices." 3 weeks later, Sophia stood on the stage at the Ohio State Speech Championship in Columbus. Her story had gained national attention, and the auditorium was filled with students, educators, and disability rights advocates from across the country. She didn't win the state competition. That honor went to a senior from Cincinnati who delivered a powerful speech about climate activism. But Sophia's presentation earned her something more valuable than a trophy: a full scholarship to Ohio State University, speaking invitations from schools across the nation, and most importantly, the knowledge that her voice had sparked a movement. Roosevelt High School implemented new policies ensuring equal access to all extracurricular activities. The district created diversity and inclusion training for all staff members. Other schools began reaching out to learn from their experience. But the most significant change was harder to measure and more profound than any policy. Students throughout the school began to understand that different didn't mean less capable, that inclusion strengthened rather than weakened their community, and that every voice, especially those that had been silenced, deserved to be heard. 6 months later, as Sophia prepared to graduate as Roosevelt High's valedictorian, she reflected on how much had changed since that autumn day when she first decided to enter the speech competition. "Finding your voice isn't about learning to speak louder," she told the graduating class in her valedictorian address. "It's about refusing to accept that your perspective doesn't matter. It's about understanding that your story, whatever makes it unique, is exactly what your community needs to hear." As she concluded her remarks, the entire graduating class rose in a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. But for Sophia, the most meaningful sound wasn't the applause. It was the conversation she could hear beginning in the audience, the whispered commitments to inclusion, the promise that other invisible voices would soon find the courage to step forward and be heard. Her voice had changed not just her own life, but the lives of countless others who had been waiting for permission to speak up, to step forward, and to claim their rightful place in the conversation. The girl who had once been forbidden to speak had delivered a message that moved not just a nation, but a generation of young people who now understood that their voices, all of their voices, mattered.